Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here, 5 Reasons Sports contributor, co-host of Scouting the Fins. You can find the audio you can find on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed. The video of that you can find on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. And you can also find a weekly defensive film breakdown on my YouTube channel at OL Coach Smith 63. All right, a win is a win, and I'm glad to finally get into that win column. But over the years, I've learned that when you exit the broadcast of the game and you sit down to watch the film, that things typically are not as good or as bad as you initially think. And this one was no different. I've shared some of the film clips on X, and you can find me there. Same handle as YouTube here at OL Coach Smith 63. And when I do that, I do it kind of in a way to take the temperature of where everyone is before I sit down to record these videos. And one thing that seemed to come through is that there's a perception that the offensive line played well yesterday. And a lot of that comes down to 0 sacks and being over 100 yards rushing. And those are great. The team did great things to get there. But when you sit down and you watch the film, the offensive line doesn't get much credit for that in my eyes. This was the worst game of the season based on my grading for the offensive line. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 5.00 is an average performance for an offensive lineman, the group has graded at 6.30, 3.02, and 3.48. So things haven't been great coming into this game. But this game came in at a season low of 2.48. And there's a lot behind that. Nobody had a great game, and there were a couple of really bad performances. And we'll get into each of those a little bit. But overall, this just was not a good game. And in my opinion, that's as much to do with Mike McDaniel's reluctance to tailor his play calling to his personnel as anything else. But, I mean, that's a conversation for another day. The idea of these videos and these grades is to assess the Dolphins' offensive line based on what they are being asked to do. So we're going to work through the individual grades going from lowest to highest. In parentheses, you can see each player's individual grade from last week, except for right guard Cole Strange, who saw his first action of the season last night. So Larry Borum, I mean, holy cow, like 0.00. I lost the grades from my database prior to 2024, so I can only make this statement for all of last year and so far this year. But this was by far the worst graded game that I've done. And based on my recollection of how the 22 and 23 seasons compared to 2024, I think it's going to be true that that goes back even further. He had 7 plays marked as zeros, completely negative. That's the worst grade on my scale, meaning that he didn't even do enough to get partial credit on those 7 snaps. And it's weeks like this that make me feel like my system is kind of flawed because we've had a few of these 0 grades in 2025, but then I go back and I look at the logic, and it's designed to filter out a certain percentage of the lowest graded plays and a certain percentage of the highest graded plays so that the outliers are left out from the scale. But then I go back and I look at the raw grades, and sure enough, what we're seeing in 2025 is worse than almost anything we had in 2024. And this particular performance by Larry Borum was worse than any of them. 6 of those plays, 6 of those 7 plays, they were marked as zeros in pass protection. And 4 of those 6 were when the protection was slid away from Borum, essentially leaving him on an island. And that's not a surprise, to be honest. Everyone knew that Borum was a bad pass protector and that you'd need to cover him up. Miami just has not done a good job of helping him out in that regard. Next up is Cole Strange, and we're going to dive deeper into this one with the film study portion of the video at the end. He came in, pretty bad at a 1.10. I've seen way too many people say that he played a good game. I just don't agree. And I'm going to give him a little grace with him still being new in the building, and this is his first action of the season. Add in the fact that as the game went on, he reduced his negative graded snaps, so there is potential that he could be serviceable. But if we're just looking at a 1-game sample size, this just wasn't good enough. Next up, we've got Jonah Savaianaya, and we consider that 5.00 is average, and that Jonah's 3.82 here is still below average. That's a little discouraging. But when you step back and consider that Jonah has graded at a flat 0 the last 2 weeks, then it would be acceptable to be a little more encouraged about the improvement. Not satisfied, but encouraged. I felt like this was very much a Liam Eichenberg type game. And I say that to mean for a lot of the game, Jonah was just fine. He had a couple of really ugly reps and a few very visible losses, and those are going to get some attention. But overall, I think this is a step in the right direction for Jonah. Patrick Paul, coming in just below average at 4.02. I don't think we should be too surprised here. I think expectations were sky high for Patrick Paul after the preseason that he had, and I think he's shown flashes of that. So far, looking at the season grades, he's had one game that was nearly perfect, another one that was highly graded, and now two that are just a little bit below average. And I think if you told fans heading into the season, they'd have been pretty pleased with that result of grades for Patrick Paul. All six of the plays that I had as partially graded negative plays, or full negative, they were all in the run game for Patrick Paul, and those are all things that I think are very very fixable. Last one up, Aaron Brewer had the best performance of the week at a 6.09, so it's an above average performance overall, but still maybe slightly below the standard that Brewer has set based on his play over the past 20 or so games that he's been in a Dolphins uniform. Certainly not anything to be concerned about that. All right, so now we have all the grades done, and I'm going to go back and visit some of the Cole Strange clips from the game. And most of these are going to be negative clips. And like I said earlier, it's not that I'm out on Strange being a possible solution or stopgap at guard, but after just 1 week, there's still a lot of bad and not enough good to just make a declaration that he's a significant upgrade over what we've had to put out there so far this season. All right, so we have Cole Strange here at right guard, and what we're going to get here is a slide right protection, and we're going to get this defensive back coming up here on the edge, going to the outside to take Borum. So we're going to get Strange having to work in space here, and Brewer getting to this defensive tackle. And you can see here that Strange trying to get into space. Feet, to me, get a little wide there. Doesn't have a good base ready to move, and he's able to get a little bit of a push-pull there. Obviously, Jonah was bad on the other side, but starting out the game early, giving up this type of pressure, just not a great look. And then our next one here is nitpicking to an extent. So this is going to be an outside zone to the left of the offense. We're going to have Julian Hill coming across to add another body to the front side of it, which means that our combo block between Borum and Cole Strange should be climbing to this defensive back that's walked up as a linebacker here. But what we're going to see here is that Strange's footwork off the line here just isn't that great. He's not really gaining ground. The backside here, you kind of want Strange to kind of post up here and allow Borum to get front side, more of just kind of a slight help. But you can see that Strange really gets into that, and because of that, we see the defensive tackle getting a hold of him, not able to get any vertical push, not able to leave that combo and get to the second level defender here. So part of this might just be footwork and cleaning it up, but not a good rep here from Strange. And this is the kind of stuff that I look at and I say if Strange is not ready to play in an outside zone scheme, then we need to have Mike McDaniel either need to see progress from Cole Strange or need to see an adjustment in the play calling that we're using. All right, so next one here is going to be a counter. So we're going to get everybody blocking down, Cole Strange kicking out, and then Julian Hill coming through to lead through as well. This is the play that ends up getting called back on a hold from Patrick Paul. But what I like from Cole Strange here, and this is not going to be a devastating pancake block or anything like that. But as we watch this play through, you can see that this defensive end, whether he is slanting off the snap, which kind of looks like, but either way, he is following Patrick Paul down, which makes this a really tough kick out block to get now. And in the past, we've seen our guards either miss that completely or be knocked off balance. So what I liked out of this was just the fact that Cole Strange is able to find that target and able to square him up. Not getting a lot of movement there, but when he's moving in that direction towards you, then that is tough to create movement. I thought this was a good enough win for Cole Strange just to stalemate him and let HN get through. Like I said, got called back on the Patrick Paul hold anyways. This one is going to be a slide right protection again, so everybody should have their outside gap. And this one initially, when we watch Larry Borum here, looks like a Larry Borum loss, but when you look at the way that the accountability should go here, right? They're not intentionally double teaming the one technique. He should just be helping out with eyes to the outside, and you can see that he's leaning in there too far. And by the time he looks back to the outside, that defender is all the way through. Borum does an admirable job of washing him past Tua, but in a perfect world, right, if we're doing this the way that it's likely designed, is that we let Brewer handle that a little more on his own, and that Strange has a little more attention to that B gap. When that defensive end slants to the inside, then Strange meets him there, and the pocket is secured. Other than Jonah letting his guy go through again. And here we go with another good one. So this is going to be a inside zone, going to be run to the right. We're going to get a solo block from Cole Strange. But this goes back to the idea that this is the type of stuff that the Dolphins need to be doing more often, in my opinion. Really leans on the strengths of Jonah on the left side. You can see that he's able to get some continued movement on that defender as Patrick Paul climbs, gets movement there. Cole Strange is not getting a ton of movement on this front side, but he's coming off the ball very aggressively, and he is creating some movement, right? The aiming point for Ollie is right through there. Looking at where Cole Strange's feet are now, you can see a little bit of movement there, and that helps to get Ollie through the lane. So good rep here by Cole Strange, and something I'd like to see the Dolphins continue to do more of, at least until we get the line back to full health and we get the guys that are meant to run outside zone. This one here is going to be the touchdown to Darren Waller. So this time it's a full slide to the right. Everybody is sliding to the right, which means that Cole Strange should have anything that comes through that B gap. And we're going to get kind of something similar to earlier, that he almost sets a little too far inside. By the time he gets back outside, not really able to get much on that defensive end slanting to the inside, gets the right hand slanted away, and if Tua doesn't get that ball out, we're giving up a big hit there. So got to be better in terms of understanding your relationship with your center and your tackle on these slide protections. And then here we're getting inside zone again, very much the same as what we saw earlier, except for Strange loses this rep. You can see that everything looks very similar, just going opposite direction of the field as what we saw earlier with Borum solo, Strange solo, and then we're getting the combo with Brewer and Jonah up to the linebacker, right? And this doesn't look like a lot here, but when you see all these, the back of the black jerseys, they are typically going to continue to pound this to the inside. But then you get number 95 here being able to shed that block, and Ollie probably bounces that a little further than what he would have liked to without number 95, Quentin Williams, shedding that block. Then you probably see him try to stay a little more vertical through that lane. So in this sense, you get why maybe Mike McDaniel's not as eager as I would like to go more heavy inside zone. But just another example of there is good and bad in a lot of these. Another good rep sprinkled in here. So this is just going to be a one-on-one pass blocking rep. Just to kind of show that there is potential here, right? Moving the feet nicely, mirroring that defender, setting a solid anchor there. So it's not all bad when it comes to pass protection in Cole Strange. And on this one, we get another outside zone run to the left. And on this, right, usually we see everybody running to the right. And you see that from the front side. They open up and run. The back side, you'll see sealing a little more. But it almost looks to me as though Cole Strange is trying to get into a seal position, right? It looks like he's trying to do what Larry Borum is doing in terms of just kind of wheeling around, but just doesn't get there. And I don't know whether this is because he's not athletic enough to get there. I think it's more of a technique issue that I feel like when we watch the Dolphins guards on the backside of outside zone, typically we see them opening up a little more the way that Aaron Brewer is here to try to run across, right? Getting almost horizontal to the line of scrimmage and then cutting that off. But just something to keep an eye on. And this defender doesn't affect the play because it goes out further. But when I grade it, I still don't overlook that completely because if that did have to cut back, weren't going to be able to do it. So this is just the kind of stuff that brings into question whether or not Cole Strange can be a long-term fit for what Mike McDaniel wants to do in this offense. And we'll finish up with a couple of good ones here. So this is going to be a three-quarter slide to the left protection. Seems like when Strange has that immediate threat in his gap, that he does a lot better with that than what we saw earlier, where he's kind of giving a little help to the inside before peeking out to that B gap. So again, not all bad with Cole Strange. I think that he does a better job when that target is immediately available versus sorting stuff out. And then finishing up the Cole Strange film review with one more good one. So this is inside zone again, and this kind of, maybe, I don't want to say help explain why we don't do it so much, but we know that it's not going to be a great fit for Aaron Brewer. And in this case, we can see that Strange actually does a good job of getting off the ball and spilling that defender over. Would really like to see Brewer be able to win that to the front side and allow that to hit through there. But Strange doing a good job of spilling the defender over and then getting to the linebacker here, or the defensive back that's walked up, and attaching there. Also a good job on the backside here of the, again, vertical movement created by Jonah and by Patrick Paul that allow that play to be successful. But in some ways, this is an example of why I feel the Dolphins should go to more inside zone, but in a way, it's also an example of why Mike McDaniel could be a little hesitant in going heavy in that direction, with the limitations that Brewer has as a smaller center. All right, so as you can see, there's some stuff to like with Cole Strange, but I think you can say that about any of the guards that we've seen so far. It's not all bad with any of them, but I think that film review also shows that there's some significant issues that need to be cleaned up for Strange before we declare him as way better than the other guys that we've had in there before. I'm certainly looking forward to whether both guards can continue to improve heading into Week 5 versus the Panthers. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you think my grades are way off and that Cole Strange had a great game, or if you have any comments on any of the other grades. As always, appreciate you guys watching.